big shout out, first of all, to Suhail Mathur and his representation.
Yes.
He actually represented both my books. So thank you to the book makers. I want to give a shout out to Locksley Hall publishers, of course, because without them, these words would not have gone out to the readers.
So hi, my name is Desmond and welcome to the book launch of The Slow Disappearing. Before I introduce you to the guest of honor, let me introduce you to our panelist. First on the list is one of my favorite authors in the horror genre, who is Mr. Siddharth Nirwan, the author of Dead People's Town. Then we have an amazing screenwriter, advertising professional and a storyteller, who is Mrs. Rekha Nigam. Also, we have another author who has written a book called End of the Rope. He is Mr. Shaurya Arya-Kanojia. So welcome everyone to the book launch.
Thank you.
And now, let us all welcome the guest of honor, Mrs. Poonam Chawla, the author of The Slow Disappearing. Welcome, Mrs. Poonam.
Hey, Poonam.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So before we start the book launch, if everyone can hold the book and show it on the screen.
You want me to do that as well?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
More than anyone you should.
To tell you a fact, it's a beautiful book cover and also a beautiful book. So congratulations, first of all, for writing an amazing book, and thank you everyone for coming on this book launch. So let's directly ask you the first question, this is my personal question and I would like to know about this. So if you can tell us more about your book and what inspired you to write it.
Okay, well, let me start with the title, The Slow Disappearing. A lot of people have asked me, is it a murder mystery? What is it? I like to give equal weight to both the words slow as well as disappearing. This book is about not about murders and deaths and disasters, but about something that's equally critical and treacherous, and that is loss. Loss of memory, loss of home, loss of country, loss of relationships. And it is a slow and treacherous loss. It's accumulative. It's like, as you go through life, and especially as people like me who have been on the planet for quite a bit of time by now, you realize that experiences are not simply like leaves, falling. They are more like one experience floats on top of another experience, and it kind of suppresses it, warps it, distorts it, conflates it, and sooner or later, it's not the same experience anymore. You've lost it. So I've noted this, I've observed it in myself and in family, and just over a period of time, and I thought it was really fascinating. I wanted to write about this because of personal circumstances as well. A while ago, I quit my job in order to we made a personal decision that one of us, my husband or I, quit our job and stay at home in order to just keep watch on my mom-in-law, who was aging, and she had age-related dementia. So I got a chance to observe her and to care for her. My husband did a lot of the heavy lifting, but I did take care of her. And we became really great friends, but I noticed how terrified and lonely she was and how difficult her life was becoming as she lost words, lost the ability to remember. She had lost children and she forgot who they were. So the whole thing was very tragic, and it got me to start journaling. And once I started journaling, it turned into a book at some point.
That's really, really beautiful. So the story, what is mentioned in the book, is it like based on a true event from your personal experience, or this is, from your own imagination?
Yeah, so like I said, since I was able to watch my mom-in-law, So it is. I would say it's one part memoir and 3 parts fiction. I didn't want to base the entire book on just one point of view because that gets a little tedious, and frankly, I wanted a wider readership. So I expanded it, and since I'd quit my job anyway, there was so much time for introspection. So I kind of added other themes to it, the theme of immigration. Again, I'd left India about 30 years ago to come here. So that, I felt very strongly about that. So there were several other themes that are weaved in. And as you guys have read the book, you'll know that I've written about family back home as well as family over here.
That's quite interesting. So let's go towards the panelists. If anyone can share your experience, as a reader, what did you like about the book and what are the best parts of the story?
So I found this book incredibly moving, much more than I expected, because it touched me in so many ways, and I'm sure it's going to touch every reader. Because while Poonam describes the slow disappearing as you're slow losing touch with your own memories or words, or like she said, it's horrible that even your children you don't remember. But I'm thinking of a lot of other stuff that disappears in your life without your, without your volition. So there are so many other themes in this book. The theme of abandonment is a huge theme throughout. And even the the mother-in-law, even she is thinking that she's been abandoned. She wants a certain kind of shoes and she's not getting them, or all those things. She thinks she's been abandoned. Our caregiver, Anika herself, has been abandoned, not just by her mother, but by her elder sister, who was somebody who was the closest to her. So, and then of course, Sameer has been abandoned by his parents, both his parents. So this abandonment and what it does to you, you actually feel that you are disappearing in their lives. So I took slow disappearing to continue to mean that, to be part of that whole abandonment theme too. That these people were so much a part of your life and they have disappeared for various reasons. Somehow they faded away. And when they do make an appearance, it seems like a shock and you don't know how to deal with it. So that abandonment, and that made it extremely moving for me. I also had a certain, experience with that. So that became very important for me. And more importantly, I felt that there was a very strong theme, which I don't know whether this is the right spot to discuss it or we can discuss it later. But a very strong theme which is not overtly mentioned, but it is the heartbreaking theme of how little agency women and children have in our country over their own lives.
Right.
So that was something that came through very strongly, whether about Ma or about Anika or about Anika's mother or even Malvika and Sameer as a child. How there is just nobody for them to support them, to, and all of that. And so some of that was really heartbreaking. Sameer's childhood experiences in the boarding school, etc. So I felt that this thing actually ran like a very, like a thread through the whole novel without coming out as a theme. But it was something that was constantly there. That's what I felt. So I felt because of that, I felt this book became so beautiful and so deep, and a book that will touch almost every person who reads it.
That's nice. Anyone else?
And so relatable too.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
What I particularly liked about the book was it was told from the points of view of 4 different people rather than there being one narrator who's just telling the entire story. Because in such a story, it was important to show what the person was feeling themselves, and to read a book which was showing the first-hand experiences of these different people in their own voices. That was very refreshing, and that was more insightful.
That's nice. Mr. Siddharth, if you'd like to add anything else.
Yeah, definitely. So most of the part has already been covered by Rekha ji and Shaurya. I just wanted to add from my medical angle, because since I'm a doctor and although I'm an ENT surgeon, but yes, in my MBBS days, I've seen a couple of patients of Alzheimer's and dementia, and learning from the point of the patient's side, what goes in their mind and how their family members are affected by it and how their journey is. It's really something, it gave us this insight about what happens beyond just the treatment part or the medical part. So in that way, it was a wonderful thing, and it was a wonderful, the relationship that has been shown between the siblings and the parents. It's really wonderful. So I really liked it very much.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, Mrs. Rekha.
Yeah, I was just saying that a little more about what Shaurya was saying was also something I felt very strongly. These, voices, everyone's voice being heard. And that gave the book so much of empathy and so much of compassion. Nobody was left out. You were peeping in everybody's heart. And I felt that's why I really, really thought that everyone should read it. Because you could be this side of the spectrum or the other side. You could be the caregiver, you could be the one who needs care, you could be the one who has abandoned, or you could be the one who has been abandoned. But you actually got to see the other point of view. You saw what was going on with them, and then you can't not empathize with them. And that makes the reader so much more compassionate, so much more empathetic to an opposing point of view, or to someone they are considering who's on the other side of the fence. So I felt that the empathy was something that was very, very beautiful about it.
That's really nice. And Mrs. Poonam, you would like to share anything else about the experience, about your journey on writing this particular book? Because definitely it must have taken a lot of time to think about the story and to write it down. So if you can share your insights and your personal experience and your journey on this.
Well, I always think of books as more like an inward journey as well as an outward journey, so I'm sure all of you authors feel the same way. And reality is something that sticks more with me than fantasy does. I think escapism and fantasy and other genres are more for, in my mind, and forgive me if I sound very condescending, but to me it's like escapism. It's like taking a holiday, you're being in a boat, everything is wonderful, but then you want to come home and attend to life. And so reality has always been very important for me, it sticks with me, as I was saying. I think back in the 70s, if you remember Rekha, I don't know, all these people are too young, but back in the 70s or 80s, when we first saw Smita Patil and Shabana Azmi, and we said, wow, this new wave cinema, it makes all that running around trees and everything look so ridiculous, right? And that's where, that was my first, it kind of opened my eyes to that it's okay to show the raw and the gritty and the real, rather than talking all the time about, raindrops and roses and fairy tales and stuff like that. So when I got a chance to write, and I started writing very late in my career, I wanted to first, set up a home and get children settled. So when I first started writing, it was basically, I was just writing, putting down my thoughts and my own introspections about my observations and my life experiences. And then I just started weaving these, fictional tales around it. But I think in the end, even though the book is 4 points of view, I think we all have a little bit of each, don't we? We have the child in us, we have the sister, the relative, the mother, the daughter. So, which is why I was able to, I think, do justice to all the different points of view. I hope
and that element of reality is what makes the book relatable on so many different levels, I think. Because it really came out through your prose as well. I mean, the way you handled your prose was so beautiful and so elegantly done. Nowhere did it feel like the book was in a rush to get anywhere. It flowed naturally. It flowed so smoothly. And earlier you were talking about that the book was 1 part reality and 3 parts fiction, and it really felt that way when I was reading about the way you designed the 3 characters, Anika, Malvika, and Ma. It really felt that you've lived through those experiences, and that's what showed through this book. And one thing which really stood out for me in the entire book was how you dealt with the concept of death, not just as a concept in itself, but also as something that is inevitable, something that each one of us is going to meet at some point in our lives. That was, in fact, there's this one particular chapter towards the end of the book, which is from Adi's point of view, where he's talking about the unexpectedness of death and how it's inevitable and how it arrives unannounced. That was very touching. That was for me, that was the highlight of the book. If it's okay with you guys, I would really like to read that one chapter. It's just one page. It would not take a lot of time. But it would, I don't think just by talking about it, I'll be able to do it any justice. So I'd like to just read that chapter word to word. Okay. It goes, the thing about grief is it cannot be pressed and folded away in like mourning clothes to be used as needed. It has no sense of protocol, comes in unannounced. It is a boozy, drugged out wreck of a relative that won't be ignored and casts a pall wherever he shows up. You could be sitting with a bowl of chips watching reruns of The Big Bang Theory when it grabs you by the throat, knocking the canned laughter right out of the box. Or maybe you are tapping on your brakes at a school crossing, watching the shiny-faced woman in pink boots directing traffic. When it hits you in the gut, this death you thought has lost its sting. Or you are finally getting into rhythm, arms entwined around your lover's neck, a tongue of murder licking the bedspread, one whisper away from sweet, shuddering relief, when it slithers in on all fours, drags you by the balls, and brings you to your knees. Everybody dies. I know that. What I did not know, grief is a mother that knocks you for 6 despite a lifetime of slow disappearing. That's some lovely prose, seriously.
Thank you.
And sorry, can we just take a second and talk about Poonam's love for food? Because the entire book was peppered with food references. Throughout the lockdown, I could not go to the market to have golgappe, but reading that one chapter about golgappe was very frustrating, to be honest.
You want to talk about food?
I would actually. So you're a big foodie, I'm assuming.
No.
Do you like to eat a lot of food, or you like to make food?
My mom was a wonderful cook. She put all her heart and soul into her cooking, and I came from a very middle class family, but there was always a lot of food on the table. And we had this extended family that was very wealthy and rich, and all their lives were beautiful. But they always came to our place, and they rang the doorbell, and my mom's name was Krishna, and said, "Krishna, kya banaya hai khane ke liye?" So I always thought that food was very important in that sense, and I could not cook at all. I couldn't boil an egg. So when I came to this country, and I was didn't have a job at first. We had one car which my husband took, and I was bored out of my mind. That's when I started learning cooking. And my kids are real foodies, and now it looks like with Instagram and whatever, the whole world is turning to foodies. So I figured, why not pepper the book? It's a heavy book. I admit that. So I wanted to pepper it with a little bit of exciting food stuff.
No, I didn't even need food to enjoy the book. because apart from all the things that we've talked about, I would again like to go to what I mentioned as the very covert theme in the whole book, which just comes through so heartbreakingly, which is the lack of agency that men, women and children have over their lives in India.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes more strongly in Ma's narrative,
Yeah.
Every time she's like, everyone knows that. She's just been handed these things, by which rules by which she's got to live. It's like the 400 rules that women need to live their life to, or by. And she goes on and saying, everyone knows that. That is such a sad acceptance of someone just laying down the law for you. And because of that, she feels so betrayed by Anika, because she's like, look at the way I was with my mother-in-law. Look at how many years all I did. So on the one hand, she's feeling cheated because she's paid her dues, and now she's not getting it from the next generation. So that's her life, and she's lived by her life by everybody knows that, all those rules. Anika, we know. I mean, I have a very strong feeling about Anika and Adi. I am like, why is Adi not sitting and chatting with his mother? Why is he not delving into her heart? He's such a favorite child. Why is he not explaining the world to his mother? That's what kids are supposed to do beyond an age. Because the parents cannot go out in the world, the children are supposed to bring the world to them. And to make it more comfortable for them, to make them make sense of what the parent cannot make sense of, especially when you're losing your memory. So I'm like, where is Adi? Why is he not here? So that, and then of course, Anika feeling abandoned, by her sister. She can't do anything about it. She can't do anything about what happened with her mother.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the saddest is Samir. When you see him in that boarding school, you want to just go and catch hold of that principal and slap her silly, slap her silly, because you have a child in your responsibility. A child is in your care. And what are you doing? So I feel that keeps coming back again and again. All the women, they are kind of, trying to make the best of what has just been given to them as a given. The only only act of agency that Malvika does is actually leave that home and go and get married to Captain. And I was like cheering for her and I was clapping for her. It may seem to be immature, it may seem to be hasty, it may seem to be something that she may later regret, but she's actually done it. So 3 cheers for that. But otherwise, the rest of their lives, all of them, all the women and that child, you keep seeing that the little agency. And if that comes home to the people who are reading, I mean, I would consider that a big triumph, because that's not something that's being pushed down your throat in this book.
Right.
It's just coming across. You can't help but deal with it. So everyone who reads it, if that's what they can take away too, as that whole covered theme, I would be really, really feel a great sense of satisfaction. And of course,
on the topic of sorry, Siddharth, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yes, Siddharth.
That, of course, everybody's written how beautifully it's written, but just the turns of phrases, so original, nothing cliche, nothing that's been said in a certain way before, no lazy writing, as we see, which we see a lot of. So for me, it's a beautifully and painstakingly written book, and that itself is such a reward to the reader.
Exactly.
Let's go to Mr. Siddharth. It's been quiet for a while. So, Mr. Siddharth, can you share your point of view, your feedback as well?
Just on a lighter note, to just add to what Shaurya mentioned. So just today only monsoons have arrived in Rajasthan. So there is a lot of thunder outside and raining outside. And since you mentioned about Golgappa, so immediately after this meeting, I'll be going outside with my car. And fortunately, the lockdown in Rajasthan has been lifted a little bit. So hopefully the shops will be open till 9 p.m.
I was saying on the topic of Ma, okay, can I just admit that I did not like Ma's character, especially in the first few chapters.
Why is that?
It was because she was just so openly bitter. I mean, I completely understand she had her own health concerns and she was living with her own prejudices, but she was just so bitter and so resentful towards Anika. But then as the book progresses, you see the change in dynamic between the two of them, even in terms of, even in the relationship between Malvika and Samir, that the way the relationships evolved through the course of the book, that was, that was something which was very beautifully done, especially in case of Anika and Ma. You saw that there was open resentment on their parts towards the other, but then there was also this, behind that bitterness, there was this longing for affection, longing to be loved by the other person. That was very beautiful and very touching.
Thank you.
That's nice.
I tried very hard not to let Anika or Ma or Samir or Malvika become either very noble or very villainous. I wanted them to be just people, just flawed people who were doing their best. And in Ma's case, yes, it progresses. The relationship progresses as they get closer and closer physically. They are in proximity with each other all the time. And when she hears a few, when they sit together and the mother tells the stories to her, there is a little bit more empathy. To get a little personal, I did once in a while when I had to bathe my mom-in-law. That is when it was almost like an epiphany. I said, oh my God, here is the future. This is me down the road. And I think those kind of moments, those are the moments that help a caregiver, I would assume, help a caregiver to get kinder or more compassionate, because one realizes that nobody is, time will take care of everything ultimately. So that is why I tried very hard to show people as they were, not as something out of a soap in a Hindi movie or a Florence Nightingale or whatever.
The multi-dimensionality of characters is it's something that really spoke to me, because I don't think people are just unidimensional in their personalities. Everyone has their complexities. Everyone has their contradictions to deal with. And you saw that in Malvika's case. You saw that in Anika's case. They were trying to be better people, but they were somewhat held back by their own experiences. The way you added these layers to these characters, made them complex in their own personalities, was another really good thing about the book.
And what you said about Ma appearing very unpleasant in the beginning, but actually you soon enough, right in the beginning, you start seeing how much she's suffering,
Right, exactly.
Whereas the dentures, which are so painful, people are saying you'll have to live with them, meaning you'll have to live with that pain. And it's such a terrible thing to say to anybody. I can imagine, that anyone to whom it is said would react with bitterness towards life if they are being asked to live with pain, with discomfort, with loneliness. So I could see very, very soon that she was so terrified. She was so scared of losing the thread of her memories. What else does a person have at that stage in life? You don't have your partner, you don't have your body, you don't have all of that. All you have is your memories. And if you lose that touch with reality, then what is left? So that to me, that tragedy came out so strongly and so beautifully that it was impossible not to empathize with Ma. And of course, there is a background that I too looked after my mother-in-law, both my parents-in-law, very, very closely. I was the only daughter-in-law, so looked after them very closely and tried my best to make them comfortable and happy. And I think to some extent I succeeded, but I could see that the whole world had changed on them. So my mother-in-law, who loved shining saris and nylon and synthetics, and she could never wear them. By the time there was money to wear those clothes, she was supposed to be all sober and and to wear all those dull clothes, and she hated it. But all the saris everyone gifted her, till I discovered it. I discovered this side of her, and because I was somebody who liked to wear off-whites. I'm notorious for wanting to wear only off-whites. So I gave her those saris, and the delight in her eyes it was a pleasure, it was a reward. And she said, from now on, she told me, please don't let my son buy any saris for me. Please, you buy them for me. So can you imagine that someone's heart wants to dress up in all the colors of the rainbow, but the whole world is imposing upon you a certain sobriety and a certain dullness which you're not identifying with? And can you imagine what happens if you can't control those things, and if you're forced to not wear jewelry? So I did something like, when my father-in-law passed away, I actually put a bindi on my mother-in-law's forehead in front of all the relatives. And I said, you're going to be wearing that bindi, and you're going to be wearing colored clothes. And I could see that she was so relieved within, but outwardly she was forced to say, nahi, how is it possible?
Right, yeah.
I can't, I'm not supposed to. And I said, no, you are going to. And I said, if something had happened to you, wouldn't Pitaji be wearing all his colored shirts and everything? So since I said it before 25, 30 people, so she got that validation. And for the next 13 years that she lived after him, she continued to wear all her colored saris and her bindi. So you just realize that the things that are imposed on you because of your age, that's such a... And at one point I was telling Poonam that I think this should be a manual for caregivers. This book, everyone should be asked, every caregiver should be asked to read it. But then I thought later, why just a manual for caregivers? This is a manual for human beings.
Right.
Because of the various people whose point of view it makes you see. It is a manual for being a human being to some extent. This book and several other books which, make you a more compassionate person are really books that should be manuals for human beings.
Yeah, and that's what the book does so well, because I'm going back to my point, because it's been told through the points of view of all these different characters. Everyone can relate to it. Be it Samir or be it Malvika Anika, be it Adi, be it Ma, everyone across the spectrum can relate to these individual voices. And because of that, the way in which you wrote the story, all these different voices just put together and sort of like in a very integrated manner. That is one of the highlights of the book.
I would have wanted Adi and Captain to be, come across clearer. I would want it to, know. But and I thought if I was writing a movie script on this, what I would do to Adi's character or what I would do to Captain's character to, explain their actions. For instance, to explain Adi's indifference. Why is he not doing to his mother what his mother gave him when he was a child? That care, that empathy, just that love, just the touch. Elderly people, they long for a touch. And I discovered this with my mother-in-law when I got a massage person to come and massage her every day, and it just made her flourish and made her so happy, because all human beings need touch. So that was something that Adi could have given his mother, for a few minutes or an hour every day. But anyway, that's not the point. But the thing is that, Adi and Captain, these two main male figures, apart Samir, of course, I'm still looking at as a child. But for both these characters, one would have wanted to know more about their, their motivations or the reasons for their actions or why they were the way they were. But
and the reason for that, Rekha, is because, frankly, I'm not very good about writing about men.
No, but Samir's character was really well fleshed out.
Samir, because he's a child, you see. But okay, the men that I've known, my husband's generation, for instance, they don't talk to women or mothers or anybody. They show their care in different ways. It's not that they are not uncaring. They do show care, but in a very different way. They don't sit and talk and sit by her feet and massage her and say, how are you doing today? But they'll take care of the medication and they'll do the doctor visits and they'll take her out for an outing or whatever. So I really don't know how to talk about them, really. And if you go back to my father's or my grandfather's generation, I was terrified of them. I've never had the kind of communication that kids have with their parents these days. Like my kids will say, Dad, don't be an idiot. That's not right. And I'm like, how can you say that to your dad? And he doesn't mind. He smiles. So
in the older days, you'd get one chapat.
I find it hard to write about men.
So who's your favorite character in the book?
I'm sorry?
Who's your favorite character in the book?
Mine?
Yes.
I would have to say Malvika.
And if I thought Shaurya...
because she's so addicted to making bad decisions, but she ultimately comes out okay. she's like me in a way. I made a lot of bad decisions earlier on, but I just like the fact that she's so stubborn and going for it. And, she does not want to be like her mother. She's not going to be sitting around, caring and getting nothing in return. And she's self-centered. She doesn't do a very good job of raising her son at first, but then, again, she tries. I like the fact that she tries so hard and she comes out winning in the end.
I think so. Mr. Siddharth is thinking about his pani puri, so he's not saying anything. Mr. Siddharth, if you can tell us.
I have a question for Siddharth.
Yes.
I don't know if so the coping mechanisms that Ma uses, at least my mother-in-law, she actually lost so many words that she forgot to speak in Punjabi, and so the mind adapted, and she started speaking in Hindi instead. After 80 years, she suddenly moved from Punjabi to Hindi. Is that? I didn't do a lot of medical research on this book because I just wanted to write from the heart and what I noticed. But isn't that something that happens?
Yeah, absolutely. See, actually, I am from a different background. I'm a head and neck surgeon, so I mainly am concerned with your ear, nose, and throat problems and anything to do with the cancer of this part. But yeah, definitely, I've seen in my medical practice a lot of these things. I think what I remember from my little bit knowledge about psychiatry is that our mind has an amazing subconscious part that we are never aware of. And it can, recall certain memories that even after 50 years. Okay. So today also, like, for example, I might remember something when I was 6 or 7 years old, which I might never would have bothered about for the past 35 years. Right. So it is an amazing, talent and power which we never know of. And yes, definitely it can certainly, make you do things and speak in languages which you think that you might not be aware of. Like, for example, just to give my example, I'm a Rajasthani. And in our home, we generally don't speak, Marwadi or Rajasthani. Okay, so Hindi is a normal language. My education has been done in Karnataka, so I know quite a bit of Kannada. But sometimes when I'll be sitting with my local friends here, like who will be hardcore Marwadis, okay, and so sometimes I'll be conversing very fluently, okay. So maybe I listened a lot of years ago my grandparents speaking in this language, okay. So it even amazes us. So although I'm not an expert in this field, but yeah, our mind is beyond our understanding. I mean, we have just discovered I think 1 or 2% about it. So we are very naive just to speak about it. So definitely, I mean, what you told about your mother, about Ma, okay, so that is quite that's there. Yeah.
So I'm just sharing something about my mother-in-law's care, because I look, and how it worked. You're talking about language, etc. So my mother-in-law was very fond of watching those terrible TV soaps, the mother-in-law sagas and all, and we all disliked watching those. So obviously we used to steer clear when she was watching. Yeah. So sometimes, and I was writing some script or the other, and she would try to stop me and say, "Listen, that woman is such an evil woman." She would say, just watch what she is going to do. And obviously I couldn't stay. And she used to feel so terrible that her own granddaughters, my daughters whom she loved, they were going off to college. I was going off to write my script. And her son was exactly like Adi, not to invest yourself, but to invest the money or the whatever from a distance. So I thought of something. I thought of a very unusual. Sorry?
I think we lost Siddharth.
No, I have muted him. I think so he's talking to someone else. Yes. So, by the way, the same story is happening in my family as well with my mom.
No, I'll just complete the solution.
Yes.
I'll just complete the solution that I found to it, which is that we all realize that we have so many people at home, but she's not getting a chance. So I actually hired somebody to come for. I really did, and everybody else was laughing at it. They're saying, like, what are you hiring this girl for? I said, I'm hiring her to talk to my mother-in-law. So I hired a girl who was actually very immature, but great fun, very excitable. And I told her, you have to do nothing. You just sit with her and watch television. Just brush her hair or comb her hair and make a choti. And just talk to her generally.
It's a great idea.
You will not believe, I now recommend it to everybody, because you will not believe what an incredible impact it had. Both of them would be sitting on that sofa every morning and laughing away and pointing out at some evil villainous vamp, whatever from the show, and talking about her. And that's all she did. We paid her a salary. I really believe that prolonged my mother-in-law's life by at least 5 years, because that girl continued to come and stay with her. And in fact, when my mother-in-law was on her deathbed, and her daughters and everybody had come from everywhere to talk to her and look after her, see her, she in that delirium was asking, where is Kiran? Kiran kahan hai? And the daughters got very upset. Who's Kiran? We said the maid. How can she be calling for the maid when all of us are here? And nobody could say. Because of her, she spoke, she expressed, and how important that is. In India, we can still afford to get people for that. And I think we should, if we can't, if we don't have the time or we can't share those interests. Sorry, I just digressed, but so much to do with the subject.
Okay, let me ask the next question to Mrs. Poonam. To whoever I spoke to, they said, if you want to become an author, you need to read a lot of books. Can you tell us who influenced you to become a writer?
Oh gosh, I read so much. I read like 350 pages a week, every week.
Wow.
But I keep going back to the first time I read a story called The Homecoming by Tagore. And that still stays with me. And then there was John Steinbeck, who wrote a little-known book called The Pastures of Heaven. That has always stayed with me as well. When they're both Nobel laureates, but at that time I was but 8 or 10 years old, and I used to read a lot. And I thought, I can write like them very easily, because I was naive enough to think that just because something is written in simple language, that it's easy. It's really, really hard to be simple and authentic and write from your heart. So those two, and I think as I got older, in my freshman year in college, I read Cry the Beloved Country by Alan Paton. It's set in Johannesburg in Africa, and it was so beautifully written that's when I realized I can never write like that. So that book has always stayed with me. The first time I fell in love with a fictional character was in Portrait of a Lady by Henry James. And I think I always remember that. And I said, someday when I write, I want to write about characters that people won't forget. And maybe some kid with 15 and 16 will have a love affair with a fictional character. So I guess these are some of the books that inspired me to write.
That's nice. I think so. Next, what you need to write is about men, so that you can.
About men.
From a men's point of view.
I've known only one man for the last 30 years. I don't know any.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Siddharth, before you go to eat your pani puri, my question to you is that, as a doctor and someone who has dealt on the front line with the COVID pandemic, what do you think is the importance of reading in today's time, that there is so much of stress in the world?
Oh, so that's a very good question. Thanks for asking that, Desmond. So the thing is that, what happens is that, since our schooling years, like we enter the 10th class and we know that we have to give a board exam. Now, fortunately in India, this year, nobody had to give the board exam 10th class, but yeah. So, and we always know that after the 10th class, we'll be choosing our streams. Right. Now, so where from I come, like a small town, generally we have only two options, either to take up, go towards the medical side or the engineering side. At that moment only, the foundation is laid in our head sometimes that, arts is taken up by those people who generally receive low marks or something like that, or who don't secure good grades. So that is a foundation that is laid in our head. And from that moment onwards, for the rest of the lives, not only literature, not only reading, I think anything to do with art, let it be painting or let it be singing, music, dancing, or even like screenwriting or anything to do with the films, it is considered it is a little bit something, not the mainstream thing.
Yeah.
Now what happened is that it is not considered serious, right? So it doesn't gives you obviously there is a lot of money in film industry, but it is not considered the mainstream or the stable profession kind of thing, the way like 20 years ago medical was considered. Now what happens is that last year when there was lockdown, okay, and people were forced to stay inside, and it was almost impossible. People got frustrated. Now I, being a doctor, I had to go to my duty every day, so for me there was no lockdown. But people survived due to reading. People survived, learning new skills, anything to do with art. People, they learned cookery, they learned singing, they learned music. They even films, OTT platforms. I think the Netflix, Amazon Prime, and all those OTT platforms kept people inside, kept people safe, and did a great service in saving them from this epidemic. So I think reading, apart from opening up your mind and activating your senses, it also is something which what Poonam ji just mentioned, the word escapism. So escapism is something very important thing that you need, especially when you are in a stressful situation. Not only if you are in a lockdown, like in the second wave, I'll just tell briefly. I'll just not go into the details. So in the second wave, when it hit us, I was posted in the Epic Center of Rajasthan, where we had 1,200 COVID patients. It was 1,200 bedded patients. And what you might have seen in the printed media or the visual media, the kind of things what they shown, actually they exemplified a lot. But these things were there. People like dying because of oxygen. People are fettering in front of us. All those things I've seen. So much pain and suffering I see every day. Unfortunately, where I was posted, just next to me was a mortuary, and continuously, after every couple of minutes, a body was being shifted inside, outside, right? So to see so much pain and suffering for like so many hours, going back home and again waking up to see, you just know that you are going to see the same thing. You need a kind of escapism, and I think reading, in that particular time, that 1 month, when there was a deficiency of beds, no oxygen was there was no remdesivir, okay. So I think in a way, reading, and even because I'm a writer, so I also write a little bit. So these two things kept me like, these two things used to recharge me for the next day, right? So I think it is very important to read, or not only read, any form of art, any form of thing, maybe singing, music, something. It is very important, because see, what I think is that Desmond, what separates us, the Homo sapiens, from the animal species or the bird species is art. Yes. Because just like us, they also go to job every day. A tiger or a lion goes to job every day to catch a deer. It also produces children. It also cares for the children. Even some animal species care for its children much more than human beings do, right? Human beings sometimes sell their children. Animals don't, right? So that's it. So what is the difference in our lives? The only difference in our lives is art. It's imagination. So we can tell and create stories. The animals cannot do it. So I think not only that it is essential, it is what we are. It is who we are. Yeah.
Right. And the best part, to tell you, I was not a reader. In fact, I should not read at all. But then I got introduced to the world of reading by Neil De Silva. And then after that, I got connected to Mr. Siddharth Nirwan, Abhishek Singh, and now you all. But the thing is, now I have only read the Indian books. Okay, so as an Indian, are Indian books better to read compared to the Western books? What do you all feel? If anyone can tell me this.
I've always read every author under the sun. Even when I was growing up in India, I grew up with Enid Blyton and Grimm's fairy tales. Those were not written by Indian writers. So it really doesn't matter who you read. And now, especially now when the world is so small, everyone is so connected. And isn't it almost necessary that it should be mandatory to read about authors from all over the world so that you get a better perspective, you know what's going on everywhere. And it's just more colorful that way, more diverse, more cosmopolitan, more sophisticated. It broadens your mind, increases your vocabulary. I think it's really important that you read all kinds of authors. I read very few Indian authors. The last one I read after Arundhati Rai and Vikram Seth and Rohinton Mistry, I don't think I've read too many Indian authors, frankly. I would like to, if they were all available for me to get on Amazon here, rather than, when I go back annually on my visit, then I pick up a couple of Indian authors. But some of them I can't even get them here. So yeah. That's
the negative part. But the thing, what I'm trying to say is, for example, if you go to the West, any author is very famous there as compared to the authors in India. Mm-hmm. Because the respect in terms of any author, an Indian author is not that very famous. He has to do a lot of things to get to that mark. So this is my point of view, because I have just got introduced to the world of reading, and I believe that in terms of promotions, in terms of promoting, I feel that we should promote the Indian authors, because we are a small community, they're still growing, and we need to help each other so that we as Indians can come to a standard and come to the world, that okay, people can consider reading the Indian stories as well. So that was my point of view.
Absolutely. And Indians here or any other minority community here gets a very, very, very small percentage. So when that's why I found a publisher first in India rather than over here, because they look at the name Poonam Chawla. I almost thought of making it a different name and going under Barbara Smith or whatever, but I didn't. But it's hard. It's publishing to begin. It's hard, first of all, to get a publisher, and then to be a minority. It's like a double jeopardy. Yeah.
Yeah. From an objective point of view, I think it somehow makes sense, because an Indian author, especially for us, reading about Indian writers will be culturally relevant. We'll be able to relate to them culturally more, and because culture does play a role in the way we live, in the way we behave, in the way we as society function. But then again, I think as people, there are certain traits, there are certain attributes, there are certain characteristics that all of us have in common. And so the stuff that transcends all these boundaries, all these, the stuff that transcends cultures and backgrounds, all of that is something that I personally like to focus on, rather than stuff that's overly reliant on a specific culture. So although at some level, maybe I do agree that for us, reading Indian writers may be better because we can relate to them culturally, but at some level, I think, like I said, there are so many commonalities between people across the world. So yeah.
Yeah, in fact, Desmond, what I feel is, somebody said that reading is thinking through another man's mind, seeing the world through another man's eyes. So we would like to see the world through as many eyes as possible, just like what Shaurya mentioned about, the same reality seen through 4-5 characters. The same world and the same human condition seen through various eyes of various nationalities. But more than that, seen even in India, seen through Indian writers in many languages. I see that people in India have just not read enough literature in other languages. Recently, somebody came to interview me for something else, for his podcast, and when I was telling him this, I said I don't trust anybody who has not read the literature in their own mother tongue. So he got shocked, and he said he was a Malayali. He was from Kerala. I said, have you read O.V. Vijayan? He said, no. I said, then you're missing a big part of your education. But of course, he was from Kerala. But I'm saying reading O.V. Vijayan opened my eyes to the Kerala countryside and to the reality there in so many ways. I was so fond of Bengali writers that I learned to read and write the Bengali language.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so when I was writing my first film, which was totally based in Kolkata, Parinita, my director and the whole team, they were shocked because, right from names to rituals and all, I had so many things. Because reading Bengali literature enriched me beyond anything else that I had read. So we don't read enough literature from other Indian languages. Marathi, of course, because it was my second language in Bombay, so I could read Marathi literature. But there are so many languages, particularly I would say Malayalam and Bengali literature. If you can read in translation, please, because some fabulous literature and poetry exists there. And therefore, I agree with Shaurya that there are no limits to the reading about and knowing about the human condition. Wherever you are, you will love, you will live, you will hate, or you will like, you will be sad, there will be heartbreak, there will be loss, there will be grief, there will be abandonment, and that is beyond borders. But yes, reading or seeing the world through as many people's eyes as possible is always going to enrich us beyond anything. Of course, for the sake of what you're saying, supporting Indian writers is something different. We need to support them, of course. And the most important thing is, which I tell everybody, buy books.
Yeah.
You see right behind me, there are books from the whole house with all my 3 children being English literature students. The house is overrun with books. Right. Sometimes different copies of the same books for different people, and prying it out of their hands and saying, we should get rid of them. Nobody will allow it, So there's always 4-5 empty books, 4-5 half-read books with bookmarks lying all over the place. And I feel that really, really enriches you. So all languages, all writers from all over the world, may their tribe increase.
Amen.
Talking about the translation, alongside the slow disappearing, Mrs. Poonam also had another book which was published at the same time, which is Mumbai's Morning. Ma'am, can you tell us something about that book as well? I guess it is published in Hindi.
Yes, nice segue, by the way. Yes, so I wrote Mumbai Mornings a while ago. It's a book about, first it was written in English. It's basically related stories. And the book is about a daughter, that's me, who goes home on her annual visits. And this is written about the conversations she has with her mom. So whenever I went back, my brothers used to say, when Didi comes home, we all get jet lagged, because my mom would wake up at 4 o'clock and I would be up with her. And from 4 o'clock to 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, we would be having innumerable cups of tea, and she'd be telling me all kinds of stories, from partition times and what happened with grandmother and she came from a very large family. So she told me a lot of stories about them. And sometimes she was a little confused because she was 85. But I collated all those things, and again, it was part fiction and part memory and part everything else from my growing up in Bombay or Mumbai, that I created this book, and that's why I called it Mumbai Mornings. So after she passed away, I wanted to honor her memory and have it translated in Hindi, because every time I thought of my mom, although she was fluent in English and Hindi and Punjabi, every time I thought of her, I just kept hearing her voice in Hindi. So I said, I have to get this translated. And so I had a gentleman from Bhopal called Anand Krishan, I hope he's watching, who did a wonderful job of translating it, and an extremely classy publisher called Book Street. What a wonderful gentleman he is, Jitendra ji, and he published the book for me, and it appeared almost the same time as Slow Disappearing. So I'm very excited to see how they both fare.
So Poonam ji.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
So like Navjot Singh Sidhu says, often says कि जो मजा हिंदी में है वो मजा और है.
हाँ बिल्कुल. बिल्कुल. When Rekha and I were colleagues in Everest Advertising some light years ago. And she was at the age of 21 or 23, I think.
No,
the head of the language.
19 and a half.
Oh my God. She became head of the language department because, they were so desperate to get somebody. And she said, I'll work, but I haven't headed a department before. And they said, just give it a try. And she did and managed it beautifully. So yes, she is our Hindi expert.
So it was, that was also, language is something else that I could speak for hours about. Because I was 4 when I left Kanpur. But that language and the cadence of that language was with me. And I always felt like a fish out of water as I was growing as a student. I was very fortunate to have 2-3 very prominent Hindi writers in the neighborhood who were friends of my parents. And I devoured their library in Hindi. The thing that they said was that if you can't find Rekha anywhere, go to Dr. Dhanveer Bharti's house or Mr. Srivastav's house. She will be in their library.
Right.
So what happened was that it was an unusual combination that I did my English literature. I did my BA in English literature and yet preferred to write in Hindi.
Write in Hindi.
So that's why the whole advertising world at that time was pretty dominated by English.
Right.
But because I could fight with them in their language, so I could push the agenda of Hindi and other Indian languages. And I didn't know what the hell an Indian language department was when I joined. I hadn't even got my BA results. I'd just given my BA exam. But just getting to know all those Indian language writers every single day, and then reading the literature of their languages, and asking them to create something that was thought of by an English writer into those Indian languages.
Right.
Adapting it, recreating it, transcreating it, those words that I used to use all the time. And that was so enriching. And that is why I keep pushing the cause of other Indian languages, because that introduced me to the cadences of those languages. So anyway, that was, and Poonam, of course, was the star copywriter at that time, writing all the lovely ads, which then one was translating.
I loved it. I loved my job.
Yes, so did I. I loved my job. Our eyes were shining every morning. We were just longing to come back to work. It was great. It was a great time. I agree. Yeah.
It was a great time for us as well on this book launch. So before we end, if anyone would just like to say anything to the author, Mrs. Poonam.
I want to say that I'm waiting for your next book.
That was my line. I
think everybody can chorus on that line. But considering the way her writing has grown and enriched and deepened and become, become more and more, richer and more complex over her books, because I've read her other books too. I think that, the next book could be some masterpiece. Not that this one isn't. I'm a big fan of this book, and I hope it gets huge success. And even before the next book, we would like to see this book be on everyone's coffee tables and be read widely and translated maybe in more than one Indian language. Really, it should be, because it is that kind of a book. So that's what we want to wish for you.
Completely agree. Looking forward to your next book.
Mrs. Poonam, can you share with us any details about your next book, so that we'll be excited from now itself?
The market can
I'm still polishing my next book, and I'm trying to find some early readers. And once I get a little bit of feedback from them, I'll see what the next step is. Another deep subject, but I'm trying to keep it very light-hearted. I'm trying to use a little more humor, tongue-in-cheek humor in this book. And then the next book after that, I'm still researching. I'm working with a girlfriend that I grew up with, and I want to write about her because she was a single girl in the 80s. She never got married, and for me, that just to grow up in India as a single woman,
right,
I thought was fascinating. So that's going to be another project as well.
Siddharth, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, on my ending note, I just wanted to, continue from the conversation that we were having earlier regarding Indian Western authors and regarding reading, global authors. So earlier in my college days, I became a reader just recently. I mean, 4 to 5 years ago, regularly I used to read now. But earlier I had read a couple of books, a couple of Chetan Bhagat books, a couple of Michael Crichton books, he was my favorite, and a couple of Paulo Coelho books. Now, when I used to read Paulo Coelho, for years I did not know that he was a Brazilian, if I am correct, right? That his books were translated, right? I thought he was an American author. So that's what the emotion is. Human emotion is constant everywhere, whether you're in Brazil, India, or in America, Africa, or in any language. The human emotion is constant. So we should read definitely all the authors. And the second thing, what I mentioned the name of Paulo Coelho is that because his books and stories were so deep, reflective, and they used to connect me to in a kind of a manner that after so many years, I felt the same connection with the Poonam's book.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Poonam, you said you would like to thank everyone.
I sure would. I do want to thank everyone. A big shout out, first of all, to Suhail Mathur and his representation. He actually represented both my books. So thank you to the book makers. I want to give a shout out to Locksley Hall publishers, of course, because without them, these words would not have gone out to the readers. Desmond, thank you for holding my hand virtually.
Yes.
Rekha, I will thank you privately. And Shaurya, I don't want to embarrass you, but I think you're adorable. I wish you a lot of success.
Thank you.
And Siddharth, busy doctor, busy writer, thank you for making the time. I really appreciate it. And I think you guys know how much this means to an author. So thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining.
I want to thank Poonam for writing this book. I really feel it's a very valuable book, and I feel very enriched by reading it, and I have been recommending it to anybody that I can too. And out of totally not because she's my friend or she's my ex-colleague, but because genuinely it's an extremely moving book, and I really believe that anybody who reads it is going to be changed forever.
Appreciate it.
Okay. So can we have a picture again with the book, just for a picture purpose?
Yes.
Yeah.
Picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Actually, here's Mumbai mornings as well.
Yeah.
I've taken a screenshot.
Oh,
wonderful.
Okay.